Imagine a child born into grinding poverty in a remote Georgian village, his face scarred by smallpox, his left arm withered from a childhood accident, growing up with a dream of becoming a priest. This child, Iosif Jugashvili, would one day command an empire of unparalleled might, his name etched in history as both a savior and a butcher, Joseph Stalin. The air in the Tiflis seminary was thick with the scent of incense and rebellion. It was the turn of the 20th century, and the Russian Empire, an ancient colossus teetering on the brink, found itself besieged not just by external foes, but by a burgeoning wave of radical thought from within. Among the earnest young men studying theology, preparing for a life of spiritual guidance, one student stood out, a young Iosif Vissarionovich Jugashvili. His face, pitted with the scars of childhood smallpox, often held a brooding intensity, his dark eyes betraying a formidable intellect and a restless spirit that yearned for something far more tangible than divine grace. Born into grinding poverty in the remote Georgian village of Gori in 1878, the son of a shoemaker and a washerwoman, Iosif's early life was a crucible of hardship. His father, a violent alcoholic, often beat him mercilessly, and his mother, a fiercely devout woman, saw the seminary as his only escape from a life of destitution. But the quiet cloisters of religious study could not contain the torrent of revolutionary ideas that was sweeping through the Caucasus. Instead of poring over biblical texts, Iosif devoured forbidden Marxist literature, his mind ignited by the promise of a world reshaped by the will of the proletariat. He was a natural orator, his words imbued with a searing passion that captivated his fellow students, and a natural leader, organizing secret study groups and challenging the seminary's rigid authority. This initial defiance was merely a prelude to a life defined by an unwavering, often brutal determination to bend history to his will. The expulsion from the seminary in 1899, officially for failing to appear for exams, was in truth a liberation, a decisive step away from the path of priesthood and towards the tumultuous, blood-soaked arena of revolution. From the moment he embraced radical politics, Jugashvili, soon to be known by the moniker Stalin, meaning man of steel, plunged headfirst into the clandestine world of underground activism. Georgia, a hotbed of revolutionary fervor, provided fertile ground for his nascent talents. He quickly distinguished himself within the local cells of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, aligning himself with the Bolshevik faction led by Vladimir Lenin, whose uncompromising vision of a vanguard party appealed deeply to Stalin's own authoritarian tendencies. He was a man of action, not merely theory. While others debated dialectical materialism, Stalin was organizing strikes, distributing illegal pamphlets, and critically engaging in expropriations, armed robberies carried out to fund the party's activities. The most infamous of these was the Tiflis bank robbery of 1907, a brazen operation that resulted in the deaths of several people and the theft of 250,000 rubles, an astronomical sum at the time. This act, sanctioned by the Bolshevik leadership, including Lenin himself, cemented Stalin's reputation as a ruthless and effective operative, a man unafraid of violence in pursuit of the revolutionary cause. His numerous arrests and exiles to Siberia, rather than breaking his spirit, only hardened his resolve, transforming him into a hardened revolutionary, schooled in the brutal realities of underground warfare against the Tsarist regime. Each escape, each return to the clandestine struggle, reinforced his image as a tireless warrior for the cause, a figure who could withstand any adversity. He honed his skills in political infighting, developing a keen understanding of power dynamics, a talent for intrigue, and an unshakable belief in his own destiny. These were the formative years, the crucible in which the man of steel was forged, not in the quiet contemplation of a seminary, but in the dark alleyways and secret meetings of a revolutionary underground, where loyalty was tested by fire and survival depended on an unwavering will. This early life, marked by personal hardship, intellectual rebellion, and violent revolutionary acts, laid the foundation for the colossus he would become, a figure whose very name would one day command both fear and fanaticism, forever altering the course of the 20th century. His journey from a scarred, impoverished Georgian boy to a master orchestrator of revolutionary terror was swift and brutal, a testament to a character defined by relentless ambition and an unyielding capacity for strategic cruelty, foreshadowing the scale of his later impact on millions of lives. As the Russian Empire crumbled under the weight of war and internal strife, Stalin's star continued its grim ascent within the Bolshevik firmament. While figures like Lenin and Trotsky were exiled in Western Europe, honing their theoretical arguments and publishing revolutionary tracts, Stalin remained largely within the empire, enduring repeated arrests and exiles to remote Siberian camps, only to escape and return to the fray with an almost supernatural resilience. This grueling, hands-on experience in the revolutionary underground provided him with an intimate knowledge of the party's internal workings, its networks, its operatives, and its vulnerabilities, a knowledge that would prove invaluable in his later struggles for power. He became known less for his intellectual contributions to Marxist theory — he published little of original thought — and more for his unparalleled organizational skills and his unwavering loyalty to Lenin. When the February Revolution of 1917 finally toppled the Romanov dynasty, Stalin was still in Siberian exile. Upon his return to Petrograd in March, he quickly rejoined the Bolshevik leadership, becoming a key editor of Pravda, the party newspaper, and advocating for a more moderate line initially, surprisingly supporting the provisional government. However, Lenin's fiery return in April with his famous April Theses, calling for an immediate socialist revolution and an end to all support for the provisional government, quickly brought the party and Stalin back into line with a more radical stance. Stalin's role during the tumultuous months leading up to the October Revolution was not one of a charismatic orator swaying the masses, a role more suited to Trotsky. Instead, he operated behind the scenes, a master of logistics and administration. He was instrumental in organizing the party's clandestine operations, ensuring the flow of propaganda, and maintaining discipline within the ranks. He served on the party's Central Committee, where his practical, often ruthless approach to problem-solving earned him Lenin's trust and respect. While Trotsky was orchestrating the military seizure of power, Stalin was managing the party apparatus, a less glamorous but equally vital task. His appointment as People's Commissar for Nationalities Affairs after the Bolsheviks seized power reflected his unique understanding of the myriad ethnic groups within the former Russian Empire and his ability to enforce central control over them. He was also a member of the Politburo, the party's highest decision-making body from its inception, marking him as one of the inner circle. During the brutal Russian Civil War that followed the revolution, Stalin's administrative and military organizational talents were put to the test. He was dispatched to various fronts, often tasked with ensuring the delivery of supplies, crushing opposition, and maintaining discipline among the Red Army troops. His methods were often uncompromisingly brutal, mirroring the harsh realities of the Civil War. He famously clashed with Trotsky over military strategy and logistics, a rivalry that would simmer and eventually erupt into a full-blown power struggle after Lenin's incapacitation. Despite his lack of military background, Stalin displayed a formidable will and an ability to make tough, often unpopular decisions, demonstrating a cold pragmatism that prioritized the party's survival and victory above all else. This period solidified his image within the party as a reliable, hard-working, and utterly ruthless executor of Lenin's will, a man who could be counted on to get things done, no matter the cost. His growing influence, built on a foundation of administrative control rather than revolutionary charisma, would become the bedrock of his future dictatorship, a silent, insidious accretion of power that few among his revolutionary comrades fully appreciated until it was far too late. The year 1922 marked a pivotal moment in the nascent Soviet Union and in Stalin's personal trajectory. Lenin, already suffering from the effects of a stroke, made a decision that paradoxically would pave the way for Stalin's ultimate triumph. He appointed Iosif Vissarionovich as General Secretary of the Communist Party. On the surface, this seemed like a purely administrative role, tasked with managing the party's vast bureaucracy, overseeing appointments, and enforcing party discipline. However, in the context of a totalitarian party state, control over the party apparatus was tantamount to control over the entire nation. Stalin, with his characteristic shrewdness, understood this implicitly. While other high-ranking Bolsheviks, preoccupied with ideological debates and governmental policy, underestimated the power inherent in the General Secretary's office, Stalin methodically began to fill key positions throughout the party and state with loyal cadres, building an intricate web of personal patronage and dependency. This quiet accumulation of power was accelerated by Lenin's declining health. By late 1922, Lenin suffered a second, more debilitating stroke, effectively removing him from active political life. Confined to his dacha, isolated from the daily machinations of the Politburo, Lenin began to observe Stalin's growing arrogance and increasingly dictatorial tendencies with alarm. In what would become known as his testament, dictated in late 1922 and early 1923, Lenin famously warned against Stalin, describing him as too rude and suggesting that he be removed from the position of General Secretary. He lauded Trotsky's exceptional abilities, but criticized his excessive self-confidence. This testament, a potentially devastating blow to Stalin's ambitions, was suppressed by the party leadership after Lenin's death, largely out of a collective fear of fracturing the party and a misplaced desire to maintain a facade of unity. With Lenin's death in January 1924, a fierce power struggle erupted within the Bolshevik elite. The triumvirate of Grigory Zinoviev, Lev Kamenev, and Stalin initially formed an alliance to sideline their most formidable rival, Leon Trotsky, whose intellectual brilliance, charisma, and past leadership of the Red Army made him a dangerous contender. Trotsky, despite his revolutionary credentials, made several missteps, including underestimating the power of the party machine and failing to attend Lenin's funeral, an act perceived as a significant snub. Stalin, the master manipulator, exploited these weaknesses with surgical precision. He skillfully portrayed Trotsky as an elitist, a divisive figure, and an enemy of Leninism, carefully cultivating his own image as Lenin's most loyal disciple. He used his control over the party apparatus to marginalize Trotsky's supporters, purging them from key posts and isolating them politically. Once Trotsky was neutralized, stripped of his military command, expelled from the party, and eventually exiled from the Soviet Union, Stalin turned on his former allies, Zinoviev and Kamenev. He accused them of factionalism and Trotskyism, deploying the same tactics of organizational pressure, propaganda, and character assassination that he had used against Trotsky. By the late 1920s, with relentless precision and a cynical understanding of human ambition and fear, Stalin had systematically dismantled all potential opposition within the party. He orchestrated a series of purges, both soft and hard, gradually removing his rivals from positions of influence, eroding their support bases, and isolating them completely. The public image he projected was one of a quiet, steady leader, a humble servant of the party, standing in stark contrast to the intellectual fireworks of Trotsky or the rhetorical flourishes of Zinoviev. This deliberate cultivation of an unassuming persona belied the ruthless calculation and Machiavellian strategizing that were his true hallmarks. By the dawn of the 1930s, the power struggle was decisively over. Stalin, once a seemingly minor figure compared to the giants of the revolution, had emerged as the undisputed leader of the Soviet Union, having outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and ultimately crushed every rival through a masterful exploitation of the party's bureaucratic structures and a chilling readiness to use any means necessary to secure his dominion. Having consolidated his grip on the party apparatus, Stalin turned his attention to the transformation of the Soviet Union itself, embarking on an audacious and brutal program to industrialize the agrarian nation at breakneck speed and collectivize its vast agricultural sector. His vision, encapsulated in the 5-year plans, was to drag Russia, a historically backward country, into the modern industrial age within a decade, a feat that had taken capitalist nations centuries. The first 5-year plan, launched in 1928, was an economic war on underdevelopment, demanding unprecedented sacrifices from the population. Heavy industry, steel, coal, oil, machinery, was prioritized above all else, with consumer goods production relegated to a distant second. Ambitious targets, often unrealistic, were set for every sector, enforced with an iron will and propaganda that glorified labor and vilified saboteurs. Millions were mobilized, often forcibly, to build colossal new factories, dams, and mines. Gulag labor, already a dark reality, expanded exponentially, supplying a virtually free workforce for the most arduous and dangerous projects, from the White Sea-Baltic Canal to the vast industrial complexes of Siberia. The human cost was immense, with working conditions often horrific, safety standards non-existent, and dissent met with swift and brutal repression. Parallel to industrialization, and arguably even more devastating in its immediate impact, was the forced collectivization of agriculture. Stalin believed that individual peasant land holdings, the backbone of Russian society for centuries, were inefficient and hindered the industrialization effort by failing to produce sufficient surplus grain to feed the growing urban workforce and to export for foreign currency. His solution was to eliminate private land ownership entirely, forcing millions of peasants into collective farms, kolkhozes, managed by the state. This policy met with fierce resistance, particularly from the wealthier peasants, or kulaks, who were denounced as class enemies. Stalin declared a liquidation of the kulaks as a class, initiating a campaign of terror that saw millions dispossessed, their property confiscated, and many deported to remote regions, imprisoned or executed. Entire villages were emptied, their inhabitants scattered or killed. The immediate consequence of forced collectivization and the brutal repression of the peasantry was a catastrophic famine, particularly in Ukraine, the Volga region, and Kazakhstan in the early 1930s. The state's ruthless requisitioning of grain, even from areas facing starvation, combined with the chaos and destruction wrought by collectivization, led to the deaths of millions, a tragedy often referred to as the Holodomor in Ukraine. Stalin, fully aware of the scale of the famine, deliberately exacerbated it through policy decisions, viewing the suffering as a necessary, if brutal, means to break the back of peasant resistance and consolidate state control over agriculture. He was unmoved by the reports of mass starvation, dismissing them as exaggerations or blaming them on saboteurs. This period also saw the first major show trial, the Shakti trial of 1928, where a group of engineers and technicians were accused of industrial sabotage and counter-revolutionary activities. Though the charges were largely fabricated, the trial served as a chilling precedent, signaling the regime's willingness to use terror and fabricated accusations to maintain control and eliminate any perceived obstacle to its ambitious plans. It instilled an atmosphere of fear and suspicion throughout the technical intelligentsia, forcing compliance through intimidation. The foundations of Stalin's totalitarian state were thus laid through a combination of hyper-industrialization, forced agricultural collectivization, and the systematic use of terror, reshaping the very fabric of Soviet society and demonstrating a chilling disregard for human life in pursuit of a utopian, albeit brutally enforced, future. The 1930s descended into a chilling period of unprecedented state terror known as the Great Purge, a campaign of political repression that reached its horrific peak between 1936 and 1938. Having crushed external opposition, Stalin turned inwards, convinced that enemies lurked within the very fabric of the Communist Party and Soviet society, ready to sabotage his grand vision. This paranoia, whether genuine or strategically cultivated, became the rationale for a systematic eradication of perceived threats. The assassination of Sergei Kirov, a popular Leningrad party boss in December 1934, served as the pretext for unleashing a wave of repression. While Kirov's murder remains shrouded in mystery, with many historians suspecting Stalin's involvement, it provided the perfect catalyst for a dramatic tightening of control. Stalin immediately claimed Kirov's death was part of a vast Trotskyite Zenovietist conspiracy and initiated the first of the infamous Moscow show trials. These trials, meticulously choreographed spectacles, saw prominent old Bolsheviks, figures like Grigory Zinoviev, Lev Kamenev, Nikolai Bukharin, and Alexei Rykov confessing to outlandish crimes against the state, including espionage, sabotage, and plotting to assassinate Stalin. These confessions were extracted through brutal interrogations, sleep deprivation, psychological torture, and threats against their families. The accused, often broken and desperate, delivered their lines as scripted, creating a chilling illusion of justice for a domestic and international audience. The absurdity of the charges often defied belief, but the verdict was always predetermined: guilty, followed by immediate execution. The purges extended far beyond the old Bolsheviks. The Red Army leadership, seen as a potential rival power base, was decimated. Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky and other leading generals, heroes of the Civil War, were arrested, tortured, and executed on fabricated charges of conspiring with Germany. This decapitation of the military command, eliminating an estimated 30,000 officers, would severely weaken the Soviet Union on the eve of World War II, a strategic blunder with devastating consequences. The terror then spread like wildfire, engulfing every segment of society. Scientists, artists, writers, industrial managers, engineers, ordinary workers, and peasants became targets. Quotas for arrests and executions were issued to regional NKVD, secret police chiefs, incentivizing them to find enemies of the people. People were denounced by neighbors, colleagues, and even family members, often for trivial reasons or out of self-preservation. Millions were arrested, interrogated,
tortured and summarily executed or sent to the Gulag, the vast network of labor camps where conditions were appalling and death rates were astronomically high. The Great Purge was not merely about eliminating genuine opposition, it was about instilling absolute terror and obedience, about creating a society where no one felt safe, where loyalty to Stalin was the only guarantee, however tenuous, of survival. It crushed independent thought, fostered an atmosphere of universal suspicion, and destroyed an entire generation of Soviet intellectuals and leadership. The human cost was staggering, estimated in the millions of deaths and many more millions imprisoned. We've delved into the unimaginable suffering and fear that gripped an entire nation under Stalin's iron fist, the scale of the violence, the deliberate starvation, the systematic elimination of perceived enemies raises profound questions about the nature of power, obedience, and human resilience. What, in your opinion, allows a society to descend into such a brutal reality, and how much responsibility lies with the individual citizens who either perpetuated, silently endured, or actively resisted such a regime? Share your thoughts below. This isn't just history, it's a mirror to human nature.
As the shadow of global conflict loomed large over Europe in the late 1930s, Stalin, now the unquestioned master of the Soviet Union, navigated the treacherous currents of international diplomacy with a mix of ruthless pragmatism and profound suspicion. Having purged his internal enemies, he turned his gaze outwards, keenly aware of the growing threat posed by Nazi Germany to the west and Imperial Japan to the east. His foreign policy during this period was characterized by a desperate search for security, a recognition of the Soviet Union's relative military weakness after the decimation of the Red Army leadership during the purges, and a deep-seated ideological mistrust of the capitalist West. Initially, Stalin attempted to forge alliances with Western democracies, particularly Great Britain and France, in a collective security arrangement against Hitler's aggressive expansionism. The Soviet Union joined the League of Nations in 1934 and advocated for anti-fascist fronts. However, these efforts proved largely fruitless. Western leaders, wary of Soviet communism and still reeling from the economic depression, were hesitant to commit to a firm alliance with Moscow. They pursued a policy of appeasement towards Hitler, hoping to divert his ambitions eastward, a strategy deeply alarming to Stalin. The Munich Agreement of 1938, where Britain and France effectively sacrificed Czechoslovakia to Hitler without Soviet consultation, solidified Stalin's cynicism about the West's willingness to stand against Nazism or to genuinely align with the USSR. Feeling isolated and increasingly vulnerable, Stalin made one of the most shocking and cynical geopolitical moves of the 20th century, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Signed on August 23, 1939, between Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov and German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop, this non-aggression pact stunned the world. It was a complete reversal of previous Soviet anti-fascist rhetoric and a betrayal of the ideological struggle against Nazism. While publicly a non-aggression treaty, its secret protocols divided Eastern Europe into Soviet and German spheres of influence, effectively greenlighting Hitler's invasion of Poland and paving the way for the Soviet occupation of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and parts of Romania and Finland in November 1939 to gain strategic territory, demonstrating the cynical and aggressive nature of the pact. These territorial acquisitions, while militarily advantageous in creating a defensive buffer, came at a tremendous human cost and further alienated the Soviet Union from potential allies. The pact was a monument to Stalin's realpolitik, a stark demonstration that for him, ideology was secondary to national interest and, crucially, to the survival of his regime.
He correctly foresaw the inevitability of a conflict with Germany, but gravely miscalculated the timing and Hitler's ruthlessness. He ignored numerous warnings from his intelligence services and foreign governments about an impending German invasion, convinced that Hitler would not attack while engaged in Western Europe, or that the pact would hold for longer. This fatal misjudgment would plunge the Soviet Union into the abyss of total war, exposing the fragility of his calculated gamble and unleashing an unimaginable torrent of suffering upon his people.
The morning of June 22, 1941, shattered Stalin's carefully constructed illusion of security. Operation Barbarossa, the massive German invasion of the Soviet Union, launched without warning, caught the Soviet leadership and military completely by surprise, despite myriad intelligence reports indicating an impending attack. Stalin, who had stubbornly clung to the belief that Hitler would not break the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and attack the USSR while still at war with Britain, was reportedly in a state of shock and near paralysis for the initial days of the invasion. For hours, he retreated into himself, unable to grasp the magnitude of the betrayal and the strategic catastrophe unfolding before his eyes. His initial directive to the army was to avoid provocations, a policy that proved tragically ill-suited to the brutal reality of the German blitzkrieg. The German war machine, honed by its lightning victories in Western Europe, swept across the Soviet border with unprecedented speed and ferocity. Three massive army groups, comprising millions of men, thousands of tanks and aircraft, launched a devastating assault along a vast front, aiming for Leningrad, Moscow, and the rich agricultural lands and oil fields of the south. The Soviet defenses, unprepared, poorly coordinated, and still reeling from the purges that had decapitated their command structure, crumbled rapidly. Millions of Soviet soldiers were encircled, killed, or captured in the colossal encirclement battles of Minsk, Smolensk, and Kiev. The losses were astronomical, exceeding anything seen in modern warfare up to that point. The sheer scale of the defeat was almost incomprehensible, pushing the Soviet Union to the very brink of collapse. Stalin's personal leadership during this initial phase was a mixture of dictatorial fury and periods of despair. After his initial shock, he reasserted his authority, unleashing a wave of terror against commanders deemed responsible for failures. Order number 270, issued in August 1941, declared that any officer who surrendered or allowed his unit to be captured was a traitor, and their families would face severe repercussions. This brutal decree, along with the formation of penal battalions and political commissars in every unit, aimed to instill absolute obedience and a fight-to-the-death mentality. He personally oversaw the desperate measures to evacuate vital industries from the Western territories to beyond the Ural Mountains, a monumental logistical undertaking that saved the Soviet war production capacity. Factories, along with their workers, were dismantled, loaded onto trains, and rebuilt thousands of miles away in a matter of months, often in harsh winter conditions. As the Germans pressed closer to Moscow in late 1941, the situation became dire. Panic gripped the capital, and many government offices were evacuated. Yet Stalin famously remained in Moscow, a powerful symbolic act that bolstered morale and signaled his unwavering resolve. He authorized a desperate counteroffensive, drawing on newly arrived Siberian reserves and relying on the brutal Russian winter to halt the German advance. The Battle of Moscow, fought in the freezing conditions of December 1941, marked the first major setback for the Wehrmacht, preventing a swift German victory and proving that the seemingly invincible Nazi war machine could be stopped. This grueling defensive struggle, fought at immense cost, forced the Germans to fight a prolonged war, a war of attrition that they were ill-equipped to win against the vast human and material resources of the Soviet Union.
The initial devastating defeats had exposed the profound flaws in Stalin's pre-war calculations and the catastrophic impact of the purges, yet they also forged a new resolve within the Soviet people and their leader. The war had just begun, but the course of a world-altering conflict had already been irrevocably set, demanding a level of sacrifice that would forever define the Soviet experience.
The spring and summer of 1942 brought renewed German offensives, pushing deep into the Soviet south towards the vital oil fields of the Caucasus and the industrial heartland along the Volga River. Stalin, having weathered the initial storm and learning harsh lessons from the disastrous defensive battles of 1941, began to adapt, albeit with his characteristic ruthlessness. He still micromanaged military operations and punished commanders for perceived failures, but he also increasingly relied on the expertise of his top generals like Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky, giving them greater operational autonomy. The turning point of the war on the Eastern Front, and arguably the entire conflict, arrived with the epic Battle of Stalingrad. Hitler, obsessed with capturing the city bearing Stalin's name and its strategic position on the Volga, diverted significant resources to the assault. From August 1942 to February 1943, Stalingrad became a hellish crucible, a city reduced to rubble, where every street, every building, every room was fought over with unimaginable ferocity. Soviet soldiers, inspired by Stalin's desperate Order No. 227, not one step back, held their ground against overwhelming odds. The brutal urban warfare, combined with the harsh Russian winter, gradually drained German strength. In November 1942, the Red Army launched Operation Uranus, a brilliant pincer movement that encircled the entire German Sixth Army within the city. Despite Hitler's orders to fight to the last man, the German forces, starved, frozen, and out of ammunition, eventually surrendered in February 1943. Stalingrad was not merely a military victory, it was a profound psychological triumph, shattering the myth of German invincibility and signaling the inexorable shift in the war's momentum. From this point forward, the initiative largely passed to the Soviets. Following Stalingrad, the Red Army systematically pushed back the Germans, though not without immense difficulty and further staggering losses. The Battle of Kursk in July 1943, the largest tank battle in history, was another pivotal moment. The Soviets, forewarned of the German offensive and meticulously prepared, inflicted a crushing defeat on the Wehrmacht, permanently blunting their capacity for large-scale offensive operations on the Eastern Front. Stalin, once again, had demonstrated his ability to rally a nation, to harness its vast resources and human capital, to endure unimaginable suffering, and to orchestrate military campaigns on an unprecedented scale. He became the symbol of Soviet resistance, his stern, unyielding image plastered on propaganda posters, embodying the nation's defiance. The Great Patriotic War, as it became known in the Soviet Union, was a cataclysmic struggle that claimed the lives of an estimated 27 million Soviet citizens, soldiers and civilians alike. It was a victory bought at an almost unfathomable cost, forging a national identity defined by sacrifice and heroism, but also reinforcing the authoritarian nature of Stalin's rule. He had led his country through its darkest hour, emerging not just as a victor, but as a towering, albeit terrifying figure, whose power and prestige reached unprecedented heights both at home and abroad. With victory secured in 1945, the Soviet Union, under Stalin's iron grip, emerged from the ashes of war as a global superpower, its military prestige immense, and its territorial influence dramatically expanded across Eastern Europe. The euphoria of victory, however, was short-lived for the Soviet people. Stalin, far from mellowing in his old age, solidified his cult of personality to unprecedented levels, presenting himself as the infallible architect of victory, the great leader and teacher. Paranoia, a constant companion throughout his rule, intensified rather than receded. The immediate post-war period saw the tightening of ideological control and a new wave of repression. Millions of Soviet soldiers and civilians who had been prisoners of war in Germany or who had lived under German occupation were viewed with deep suspicion by the regime. Instead of being welcomed home as heroes, many were immediately sent to gulag camps, accused of collaboration or simply of having been contaminated by exposure to the West. Stalin feared that contact with foreign ideas and systems would undermine the ideological purity of Soviet society and challenge his absolute authority. Intellectuals, artists, and scientists found themselves subjected to renewed scrutiny and censorship. The infamous Zhedin Doctrine, named after Politburo member Andrei Zhedin, imposed strict ideological conformity, condemning any artistic or scientific expression deemed bourgeois or cosmopolitan. Campaigns against rootless cosmopolitans, often thinly veiled anti-Semitic purges, targeted Jewish intellectuals and artists, accusing them of lacking loyalty to the Soviet state. Meanwhile, the post-war world quickly solidified into a bipolar struggle between the Soviet Union and the Western powers, ushering in the era of the Cold War. Stalin, viewing the capitalist West as an inherent enemy, believed that conflict was inevitable. His actions in Eastern Europe, where he systematically established Soviet-backed communist regimes in countries liberated by the Red Army, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and East Germany, were instrumental in drawing the Iron Curtain, famously described by Winston Churchill. These satellite states served as a buffer zone against the West and expanded Soviet geopolitical influence. The Berlin blockade of 1948-49, an attempt by Stalin to force the Western Allies out of West Berlin, brought the world to the brink of another major conflict, showcasing his willingness to employ aggressive tactics to achieve strategic objectives. Domestically, post-war reconstruction was undertaken with the same brutal efficiency as pre-war industrialization. Cities like Stalingrad and Leningrad, utterly devastated, were rebuilt with astonishing speed, again at immense human cost and under the centralized control of the state. The focus remained on heavy industry and military development, particularly the race to develop nuclear weapons, which the Soviet Union successfully achieved in 1949, ending America's nuclear monopoly and dramatically escalating the stakes of the Cold War. Stalin's control over the party and state remained absolute, if anything, growing more totalizing in his final years. Dissent was unthinkable, and even within the Politburo, no one dared to openly challenge his decisions. He cultivated an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, playing his subordinates against each other, ensuring that no one could accumulate enough power to threaten his position. The apparatus of state terror, though less indiscriminate than during the Great Purge, remained a potent instrument of control, ensuring that the Soviet Union remained a totalitarian monolith, outwardly powerful but inwardly ridden with fear and suspicion, always waiting for the next political earthquake engineered by its aging, increasingly paranoid leader. As the 1950s dawned, Joseph Stalin, now in his early 70s, remained the undisputed, godlike figurehead of the Soviet Union. His aging body began to betray him, But his mind, steeped in decades of ruthless power politics, remained sharp, though increasingly consumed by paranoia and suspicion. The post-war years, far from bringing a relaxation of control, saw Stalin intensify his dictatorial tendencies, growing more isolated and suspicious of even his closest associates. He rarely appeared in public, preferring to hold court in his dacha, manipulating his inner circle through fear and uncertainty. The cult of personality reached its zenith, with his image omnipresent, on posters, statues, and in every textbook. He was portrayed as the universal genius, the ultimate authority on all matters, from linguistics to agricultural science. Beneath this veneer of infallibility, the machinations of state terror continued, albeit with a different focus. The infamous doctor's plot emerged in 1953, a fabricated conspiracy theory accusing a group of prominent Kremlin doctors, many of them Jewish, of plotting to assassinate Soviet leaders, including Stalin, through medical malpractice. This bizarre accusation, fueled by latent anti-Semitism and Stalin's own increasing paranoia, threatened to unleash another wave of purges, potentially targeting his own inner circle, whom he suspected of insufficient vigilance. It signaled a new and dangerous phase of state terror, one that might have consumed even those at the highest echelons of power. There was a palpable sense of unease among the Politburo members, who knew all too well how quickly a trusted comrade could become an enemy of the people. His health, however, was deteriorating rapidly. He had suffered several minor strokes in his later years, and his lifestyle, characterized by heavy drinking during late-night dinners with his inner circle, took its toll. On the night of February 28, 1953, after one such dinner at his Kuntsevo dacha, Stalin suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage. For hours, no one dared to disturb him, fearing his wrath. His guards, under strict orders not to enter his private quarters, hesitated to check on him, a chilling testament to the paralyzing fear he inspired even among his most loyal servants. It wasn't until the following morning, March 1, that he was found unconscious on the floor. His inner circle, Lavrentiy Beria, Georgy Malenkov, Vyacheslav Molotov, Nikita Khrushchev, rushed to his side. The atmosphere was a bizarre mix of genuine concern and thinly veiled anticipation. Doctors were summoned, but precious hours had been lost, and many of the top medical specialists had been implicated in the doctor's plot and were either imprisoned or under house arrest, hindering effective treatment. For 4 agonizing days, Stalin lingered, his body convulsing, his consciousness fading. The world watched, breathlessly, as the fate of the man who had dominated global politics for 3 decades hung in the balance. On March 5, 1953, at 9:50 p.m., Joseph Stalin was officially declared dead. The announcement plunged the Soviet Union into a complex mix of genuine grief, relief, and profound uncertainty. Millions wept openly in the streets, mourning the father of their nation, while others, in the privacy of their homes, dared to whisper hopes of change. His death marked the end of an era, a turning point that immediately set in motion a struggle for succession among his lieutenants, and a gradual, though often halting, process of de-Stalinization that would reverberate through Soviet society for decades. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief, though the shadow he cast would linger for generations, his legacy a permanent scar on the face of the 20th century. His final days, shrouded in the terror he himself had created, epitomized the chilling isolation of absolute power and the profound human cost of a life dedicated to total control and the remaking of nations through unimaginable brutality. The power vacuum created by his passing was not immediately filled, as the fear of his living presence had been replaced by the daunting question
of how to govern a vast empire built upon his tyrannical foundations, yet yearning for a release from the stifling atmosphere he so meticulously cultivated over a quarter-century of undisputed rule. The world held its breath, wondering if the Man of Steel's empire would crumble or simply morph into another, equally fearsome iteration of authoritarian control. The answer would gradually unfold in the decades that followed, but the immediate impact of his death was a profound shift in the psychological landscape of the Soviet Union, and indeed the entire geopolitical world. His passing, long awaited by many, was simultaneously a moment of release and a moment of immense, frightening uncertainty, as the future of a world shaped by his iron will now stood on the precipice of an unknown trajectory, waiting to see what new form the Soviet colossus would take in his absence. This seismic event brought to a close one of the most brutal and impactful personal reigns in all of human history, leaving behind a legacy of both victory and unfathomable human suffering, the true measure of which continues to be debated and understood even today, many decades later, as the world grapples with the enduring shadows of his totalitarian rule and the lasting echoes of his cataclysmic decisions. The finality of his death marked an irreversible chapter in the annals of time, but the story of Stalin, the man, and the myth would continue to unfold in the collective memory of humanity, a testament to the enduring power and terrifying consequences of unchecked ambition and an unyielding will to power, reminding us of the fragility of freedom and the eternal vigilance required to safeguard human dignity in the face of such overwhelming historical forces. It serves as a stark warning, etched in the very fabric of the 20th century, about the perils of totalitarianism and the profound impact a single individual can have on the destiny of millions, underscoring the vital importance of understanding this dark chapter to prevent its recurrence.